Okay, welcome. Today I want to offer some reflections about attachment theory and boarding school, and particularly about ambivalent attachment. So I've often talked about avoidant attachment, that being the main type of attachment that we get in boarding school, but I wanted to talk about ambivalent a bit today. Okay, thank you. So I've been reading the last week or so this great book called Almost Boys by Isabel Ross, who I'm interviewing next week on my podcast. And she is a educational psychologist, and she's talking about her experiences of boarding school and how that relates, to kind of educational psychology. And it's really great because she brings in attachment theory into it. So I just wanted to talk through a little bit, and I've got quite a few different papers. I've got Nick Duffell's work, I've got Power of Attachment here, and I've also got some Ann Power's papers. Just wanted to read the definition of ambivalent attachment. So, securely attached people typically grew up with plenty of love from consistently responsive caregivers. You've then got the avoidant who, haven't had enough of that secure attachment, so they keep intimacy at arm's length. That's avoidant. And then you've got the ambivalent attachment, which she says people with the ambivalent adaptation deal with a lot of anxiety about having their needs met or feeling secure in being loved or lovable. Their parents might have shown them love, but as children, they never knew when their parents might get distracted and utterly pull the rug out from underneath them. Their care was unpredictable or notably intermittent. They can be hypervigilant about relational slights or any hint of abandonment, which amps up their attachment system into overdrive. Anticipating the impending inevitability of abandonment that they are convinced is coming, they often feel sad, disappointed, or angry before anything actually happens in their adult relationships. For ambivalence, consistency and reassurance are paramount. So I'll also read out a little bit from the actual chapter. So she says, just as avoidant people are typically associated with some fairly challenging qualities, so some of the qualities, I associate more with avoidant, but I can see I have ambivalent attachment as well. So sometimes I can be needy, but generally, how I survived is, keeping people at arm's length. So she says here, adults with ambivalent adaptations are sometimes denigrated as needy, clingy, oversensitive, controlling, high maintenance, or high strung. Ambivalently detached folks really want a relationship, so their attachment system is full on. They need more help to calm the overactivation, which is usually a bit easier than for the avoidants, who need to lift the brake against connection in order to uncover possible longing to be in relationship. So that's just a little bit from the Power of Attachment. And then Nick Duffell in Trauma, Abandonment and Priviledge. It's, this is more from the attachment side, but he says being sent away to boarding school at a young age effectively breaks the strong attachments that have nurtured a child. Children find themselves in an institutional world, sometimes run on masculine and patriarchal lines with little feminine or maternal influence. This is entirely unnatural. This is an entirely unnatural rupture. No psychological or developmental theory of any kind supports such practice. Instead of growing through a process of natural maturation over a number of years, children are forced to grow up too quickly, to put away childish ways and become adults before their time. I think I've heard in a lot of schools from clients or with others that I've read, it's almost, I think, a week. You get a week to learn the new rules. You get a week to learn the language of the school. You have a week to be able to cry or to mess up, and then after a week, the rules come in, you can be beaten, you can receive all the punishments. So basically, rather than it being that gradual, it's immediate, and it can be shocking, shocking for me. So instead of having a secure base of good attachments, boarding children tend to grow up emotionally and relationally detached. Children compensate by developing an internal refuge, the strategic survival personality, to which they transfer their attachment and reliance. In consequence, ex-boarder adults often seem to show signs of a child inside of them who has been frozen in time and never organically grown up, and who tends to dominate some of their behaviors, especially in intimate relationships. So that's just kind of Nick. And I'll move on to Isabel Ross's book here. So she talks about how she is ambivalent attachment. She says basically that children with an anxious ambivalent attachment style are equally anxious, but in school they are often the center of dramas with their peers. These children show off or act as the class clown and demand their teachers' time and attention. Adolescents with an ambivalent profile desperately want relationships, but are sensitive to criticism and exaggerate the risk of being let down or excluded by their friends. Their need for emotional reassurance is constant, but they rarely notice this need in others or reciprocate. And she just talks a little bit here about the avoidant attachment. She says an avoidant relationship style seems to be common amongst adults who boarded at traditional British prep and public schools. An avoidant personality fits well into the social norms of the British ruling class and is shaped and encouraged by the public school. Since a child's relationship characteristics are formed by their earliest experiences, it's unlikely that boarding schools are entirely responsible for this avoidant profile. Even children who are sent to boarding prep schools from 6 or 7 years of age. Yeah, so that's what she talks about here, saying that, and I think that's fascinating, it's, the attachment style, we arrive at the schools with an attachment style, whether it's secure, ambivalent, avoidant, or there's disorganized as well. So yeah, really recommend reading this book. It's fascinating. And then the last couple of bits are a couple of papers I have of Anne Power, and she says, and she's quoting John Bowlby. Bowlby says that the term anxious ambivalent attachment refers to people who have a low threshold for manifesting attachment behavior. Yeah. And she goes on to say, which is precisely the kind of behavior that sets a child up to fail with both peers and teachers. Under the pressure to conform at school, most of these children will achieve some level of control over their emotionality. Though adults may be pleased with the apparent progress they are making, this is not a healthy regulation of the self, but the adoption of a pseudo-avoidant pattern. Yeah. And she goes on, this is another paper, this is a paper, I can't remember what year this was from, 2007, called The Impact of Boarding School on Attachment in Young Children. She says children in this group of ambivalent children are likely to be the most visible in their rage and grief at the abandonment. These children will not hide their feelings and may literally cling to their parents or to the car as their call it the IWM, the internal working model, tells them to keep hold of their caregiver. Holidays may be overclouded and relationships distorted as they try to maneuver against the awful day when the axe will fall again. This pattern makes it particularly difficult to integrate with other children. So much energy is spent in grief and trying to alert the attachment figure to the need for care. My experience of clients who belong to this group suggests that they may be particularly hurt by the boarding experience, to the daily misery of longing for home and hoping, even after years, to change their parents' mind, there may be guilt at not enjoying the experience for which parents have paid heavily. Educational outcome is likely to be most compromised in these children who are literally preoccupied with their attachment needs and the attempt to have them met. They may succeed in beguiling a teacher for a special relationship, but the cost of this is to be known and despised as teacher's pet, and to pay heavily for the brief periods of soothing with a special teacher. So yeah, just some ideas there. I think for me, in my own experience of boarding school, working with others, these are just my figures. I would say 85%, 80% of people are avoidant that I've worked with. About 10% are ambivalent, and then about 5% are the crushed, which are the disorganized. So some of us arrive as secure, but as she talks in here, she says here, I hypothesize that the ratio of secure to insecure children in this group is already below the average, even prior to the damage that boarding will inflict on attachment patterns, because I believe that most parents who have themselves had the security that enable them to raise a secure child would not willingly agree to send their child away at 7 or 8. Although a key characteristic of a secure attachment is resilience, I speculate that in this particular experience of being deliberately distanced from one's parents, the impact for young secure children could be particularly disrupting. The hypothesis is supported by Chavrian, though she points out that those who had a secure early attachment may be more able to use therapy later in life. These secure children will be desperate to retain a belief in their loving parents and may resort to Fairbairn's 1952 moral defense. The only way the child can see the parents as good is to see the self as bad. So I sometimes see this with people who argue in favor of boarding school, saying, it's because they had a difficult life before they arrived at boarding school. But what she's arguing here is that if you were securely attached, actually you're going to see yourself as bad. So, it's just fascinating to read this. So this is just some reflections, quite a lot of information today. Like I said, I've got Isabel Ross. I'm speaking to her next Monday. I spoke to Dr. Mark Stiebe, who wrote the book Home at Last, which is a beautiful book, and we had a lovely discussion. That will go live on Friday. The film is taking momentum. We've got the retreat coming up in a couple of weeks that we're going to be filming, and everything is taking off. So thank you again for your support, and I look forward to speaking soon. And please do comment. Is this relevant? Maybe you were at school and you saw some ambivalent attachment. I am drawn to, as I listen to these, read this, is so many comedians wondering if they were ambivalently attached, and their way was to become the Joker. So I don't know, but I'm just intrigued by that. Any questions, please do let me know.